Good afternoon. On behalf of AHCI MENA, we thank you for attending today's webinar entitled Scientific Publication by Mr. Khalil Kreidieh from AUB Faculty of Medicine and Medical Center. Mr. Kreidieh pursued his university studies at AUB. He holds a Bachelor of Science in Medical Laboratory Technology, a minor in Public Health, and a Master's of Science in Epidemiology, all from AUB. Khalil is holder of prestigious AUB Penrose Award and a Graduate Academic Achievement Award. For 9 years, he worked in research and teaching at AUB Faculty of Health Science. He has more than 15 published research scientific articles and 1 book chapter. In 2016, he was appointed at AUB's Faculty of Medicine and Medical Center as their academic and special project coordinator. Khalil joins us with more than 13 years of experience in medical and health research, teaching, and administrative academic services. During this webinar, members will learn the different types of scientific publication, the publishing process in scientific journals, the major index databases, and the statistical evaluation of bibliographical data, including journals and researchers. Please feel free to submit questions at any point in time during the presentation using the chat feature on the bottom right of your screen. We will answer as much questions as possible at the end of the webinar. Thank you again for joining us today, and I would like to welcome Mr. Kreidieh.
Thank you. I would like to first thank the AHCI MENA for welcoming me on board. It's my pleasure to be delivering today's seminar with you despite the coronavirus pandemic. Thank you for this welcoming introduction. Today's seminar is about scientific publishing. And I want to tell you that the content of this webinar might appear basic to some participants. Nevertheless, you can consider it as a refresher course. And the first few slides, I will go rapidly through them because most of the attendees know about them. And then we will highlight more about the major index databases and the statistical evaluations of bibliographic data, including journals and researchers. The outline will start to say to introduce why do we do scientific publishing and what the major types of scientific publications. I will tell you the difference between peer versus non-peer review, the open access journals, the major databases, and as I said, how to evaluate researchers. So why do we publish in science? Some researchers do publish because they would like to communicate their findings. This is a way to advance scholarship. And others would like to advance their career, like most other academicians across universities and as well as medical centers around the world, especially if they also introduce teaching and education programs. Some do it because of their personal satisfaction, and others just to have and gain funding throughout their research studies. As you all know, there are several types of scientific publications. We can classify them into 3 major parts. The first one is the journal publications, followed by the book publications, and last but not least, gray publishing. So what are the journal publications? They are forms of advancing the scientific results of any findings. Most papers are original in type, and we'll go in depth about explaining what do I mean by original. Here I want to highlight that each article that is published in journal currently has a unique identifier. This identifier, we call it the DOI, or what stands for Digital Object Identifier. And each journal by itself will have what we call the ISSN, which is the International Standard Serial Number. It's an 8-digit number which identifies printed or electronic serial publications. Going through the types of journal publications, the main types are the The main parts are the original research articles. This is basically what most of you in academic centers and in scientific faculties do. It's a full-length manuscript that have a significant advancement of the knowledge in a particular field. And basically it is outlined as introduction, methods, results, and the discussion. Other forms could be a review article, a rapid or short communication, and as well as letter to the editors, viewpoints, editorials, conference reports. And the slides are there. We're gonna share them later on so you can read about each type of these journal publications. Going now to book publications, the most classical forms are the book and the monograph, the textbook. However, compared to journal publications, these publications, the book one, will take time and resources in publishing, including the correction of the grammar, a uniform layout, figures, tables, and equations. So it's more time consuming to prepare compared to a journal manuscript. And each book will have an identifier, we call it the ISBN, which stands for the International Standard Book Number. It's a 13-digit unique identifier for monographs and books around the world. So we have the textbooks, the monographs, and other forms like proceedings, professional books, reference works, and handbooks. As most of you know, that journal publications and book publications are usually handled by a publisher. However, if there's no publishers in a form of publications, it can go into a gray literature. So gray literature are evidence-based or could be any personal opinion that is published, but it's not controlled by a commercial publisher. And they are basically not indexed by the major databases, and they are hard to find. That's why recently when we talk about systematic reviews, when you refer to a librarian, it is advisable not only to use journal and books publications, also to look about gray literature databases. So what are the gray literature? It can include reports, manual, thesis, reprints, conference abstracts, newsletter, leaflets, and any web object. So now I'm gonna tackle what is the difference between a peer-reviewed versus a non-peer-reviewed publications. So as you might know, and if you've published before, usually to publish in a journal, it goes through a long process. So first of all, as a researcher, you do your analysis on a certain study or a certain hypothesis, and then you have findings, and you write these findings in the form of an original article that includes the introduction, the methods, the results, and the conclusion, and then you need to publish this in a peer-reviewed journal. So once you send this publication or this manuscript to a journal, and you have to look in the journal basically about the authorship guidelines and how to form the text and the tables and the figures in this manuscript, you submit your articles to a certain scientific journal. The editor of that journal will receive this journal, this manuscript, and then he or she will submit it to what we call reviewers. These are experts in the field, and then the reviewers might submit their comments to the editor to either accept with changes or without changes, or to reject this publication. And then the editor will submit the response of the reviewers and the final decision to the author, basically the corresponding author. So if your manuscript will go through all this process, this is why we call it a peer review process. It is reviewed by professional experts in the field. And the review process gives the article that you're publishing more authority compared to a non-peer reviewed one. That's why in academia, when we assess researchers and we assess publications, we do look at if it is in a peer-reviewed versus non-peer-reviewed. We want to make sure that it went through this peer revision. And basically, the most databases that you know around the world, the PubMed, Medline, Embase, Scopus, these databases usually they publish articles that are in peer-reviewed journals. However, if you want to make sure if this publication, if this journal is peer-reviewed or non-peer-reviewed, our library, and I don't know if libraries at your academic institutions do have access to this database. If not, you can ask them to have access to it. We call it Ehrlich Web. So I'm gonna go to Ehrlich database. So let me share with you the database. This is the Ehrlich database. For example, I wanna check if I check a certain journal. For example, I'll put the first Lebanese or Lebanon. So these are all the scientific journals around the world that contain, for example, the keyword Lebanese. If you check here the black mark, it will tell you, for example, our Lebanese medical journal is a peer-reviewed journal. So this, if there's this black icon, it will tell you that the journal is refereed. For example, the Lebanese dental journal, if it's still accessible, it's non-peer-reviewed. It also will tell you if the journal is open access or not an open access. I'll go back now to my presentation. So what is the difference between open access and non-open access? And when you submit a manuscript, the journal will tell you in the authorship guideline if it is open access or not open access. And as you know, most journal publications are dominated by commercial publishing companies, and the 42% of the published articles are by publishers like Springer, Elsevier, and Wiley. So in the past, usually because this is it's commercial and the journals need money in order to publish articles, they used to do it by what we call a subscriber-based system. So your library or you as a reader will subscribe in order to access an article and read it. And this is how the journal used to take the money or the finance in order to continue. However, now the system is shifting towards what we call an author-based system. If you want to publish in this article, you need to pay for this publication, and this is what we call now open access. So you might ask me, do we publish in open access versus non-open access? It depends about your institution. What do they advise you to do? But open access will let your publication go be open to everyone to read it, and this will help you as an author to get more citations and for your work to be cited. Now I'm going to shift to talk about the major index databases around the world, and that will tackle the researcher, not only the publication. I will talk about Scopus, Google Scholar, and the ORCID ID. So Scopus was founded in 2004 by Elsevier. It's a database that it includes peer-reviewed journals, book series, conference papers, and patent records. And most of the journals are the peer-reviewed ones, as indicated in my slides. And what's nice about Scopus that it includes not only your publications, it also includes an authorship profile. And as an author or as a researcher, whenever you start publishing, Scopus by itself will identify you as an author, and the Scopus will create its own a profile for each and every author and researcher around the world, starting with the first publication. And this profile will include your information, your affiliation, as well as what we call total citation and H-index, and I will come to explain these by the end of my presentation, as well as the ORCID ID and in-depth and visual analysis tools. So you don't need to create your own Scopus profile. Scopus alone will be creating it for you. Here in my slides, I put additional information for you to, when you want to watch again this webinar, to go and to dig more into Scopus. I just want to highlight, if you search for your name on Scopus and you found that you have several profiles, you need to merge them into one profile by contacting Scopus. And this could happen if you change an affiliation. For example, you could be now working at the American University of Beirut, and then you work at a different institution, you have a different affiliation. Scopus alone will not know that this author is the same author, even if they have the same name. So then you have to contact the Scopus to merge your Scopus profile together. Or for example, especially in the MENA region, we sometimes have what we call in Arabic al-Ta'rif. So you might be publishing with the name, for example, Khalil al-Rifa'i, for example, or sometimes from Khalil Rifa'i. So Scopus might not be able to identify if you are the same author. So due to changes in the name, you might have different profiles on Scopus, and then you need to contact an Scopus to integrate both profiles or different profiles together. Google Scholar is also an index database. However, in order to have a Google Scholar account, you need to have a Gmail account, and you as a researcher create this Google Scholar. Google Scholar was founded in 2004 by Google, and
first you'll need to unlock your phone.
So Google Talk is talking to me, in contrast to Scopus, as I said, you need to create your own profile through a Gmail. However, it would only tell you about what are the publications. You add them manually, so you make sure that this is my publication and you add it, and it will tell you the citations and the H-index. For me, as in my capacity as the academic coordinator at AUB, I tilt to favor more Scopus versus the Google Scholar, because Scopus will include not only your publications, it might also include the grey literature, and this might let the total citations and the H-index to be inflated. So now if you have a Google Scholar and the Scopus profile and you compare them, you will see that the numbers on Google Scholar are more than that on Scopus, because Scopus will only include the refereed journals and the books. However, Google Scholar might include the grey literature. And I kept here in my slides how someone can create a Google Scholar. So once you watch this webinar again, you can pause on this slide and follow these steps. ORCID ID, it's an identifier also for the authors and the researchers. Like Google Scholar, you need to create this ORCID ID, and I urge you all to have an ORCID ID. You go to orcid.org, you create a profile, you add your own publication, and as you might be publishing nowadays, also journals might ask you about your ORCID ID. So this is a personal identifier for you as an author. So, and now on Scopus, your ORCID ID, if present, will be also available on the Scopus profile. And this will help your work to be better viewed and more cited. So I urge you all to create an ORCID ID, and you can go to ORCID. It's very simple on how to create it. Now we talked a lot about journals and books and the other types of scientific databases. Now, how do we usually at scientific and academic institution evaluate researchers? And these are my own opinion and advice to everyone, and it depends about your institution, how do they evaluate review, but globally and in advanced academic institutions and universities around the world, they basically follow the same guidelines. So I always advise my faculty member, for example, at the Faculty of Medicine and Medical Center at AUB, to publish more journals versus books and gray literature. And when we talk about journal publications, to publish original articles more than reviews or rapid case reports or rapid communications and any other forms of article. And we also ask them to be the first or the corresponding author on the publications. If you have any other contributions, you can be listed the second, the third, the fourth. So how are authors positions evaluated? So if you are a major contributor to the work, you are the first author, you're the corresponding author or receiving author. The first author, as it's identified as the and the authorship positions order, you're the first one. That's why you have the major contributor to this research. A corresponding author usually is the author that communicate with the with the journal where you are submitting your manuscript. And last but not least, the senior author. You could be the last author, but you are neither the first nor the corresponding, or you can be the corresponding. It depends about how you divide the work and the authorship positions between you and your collaborators. Basically, you are the PI or the one behind all the work that has been done. So nowadays, if you read scientific articles, some journals do accept that the second author will have equal contributions with the first author, and this should be considered because you equally contribute than you are the first author. But whenever you want to publish, make sure that the journal where you are publishing do accept this form. So the first author and second author will have an asterisk besides the name, and to indicate that they are equally contributed. And some also accept co-correspondence, so two corresponding authors will be on the same publications, and ethically, professionally, and factually, we should take this into consideration. Here I want to highlight, when you publish in journals, the importance of the impact factor of the journal. There are several indices about how the quality of your work. One of them is the impact factor. And at AUB, we follow what we call the journal citation reports. It's a database. You go into the database. I will go quickly into it. I'll go into the link to give you a brief overview about it. So this is it. For example, if you have any journal in mind you want to publish in, you type the name of the journal. For example, I will type infection. You go to infection, you do the search, and it will tell you the impact. I will go to another, American Journal of Infection Control, for example. Now, given the coronavirus pandemic, okay. Oh, it's not working. Excuse me for any technical error. Anyways, just to let you know that I will show you that in my slides. I put screenshots from here. So It will tell you the impact factor of the journal, and it will tell you also the ranking, what we call the quartile. So as you know, for example, if you are publishing in a medical specialty or a scientific specialty, for example, let's say radiology. So this is a category that where the journal is listed under, and all the journals that publish under theme or this category of radiology, like we have 100 journals that publish on radiology research. So the first 25% in terms of the decreasing order of the impact factor will be Q1. This is the top 25%. The 50 to 25 will be in Q2, 75 to 50% will be in Q3, and the last bottom 25% will be in Q4. We always advise researchers around the world to publish in Q1 and Q2. This will show a better quality of the work versus Q3 and Q4. So when you are searching for a journal to publish in, do look at the quartiles and make sure start with Q1 journals, and if in case your publication didn't go smoothly, you can decrease to Q2, Q3, or Q4. And I put here in my slides also helpful information about how to search for journals as well. Also in JCR, for example, I want to publish under pediatrics, but I'm not sure about pediatric journals are found around the world. I select the category of pediatric. I tell JCR I want, for example, Q1 or Q2 journals, and JCR will list all these journals in order of that category. Also, there's a good website by Elsevier called Journal Finder. So when you go to Elsevier, this link, Journal Finder, you put the keywords, the title, and the abstract of your manuscript, and Elsevier will tell you a list of journals depending on your keywords, which one is more important, which one fit the objective and the aim of your work, and you can publish in it. Nevertheless, it will also state other indices for the quality of the journal, like the site score and the impact factor. But I advise you to double check, go again to JCR and make sure about the impact factor and the quartile. Also, when you choose a journal, definitely go to the journal website, and there read the aims and objectives and make sure that your work fits into that specific journal. And I advise you not to rely on Google when searching for the impact factor of the journal, and not on the journal website itself, because some predatory journal might inflate or promote themselves with an incorrect impact factor, and you might fall into the trap. Just make sure that the impact factor is true by going to JCR. So I talked about H-index and total citations. So when we assess authors and researchers and faculty members for promotions, for examples, or appointments at academic institutions, we look at the indicator that is called the H-index, and for example here, and the total citations. So as you know, if you published a paper, for example, and this paper will be referenced or used by other authors, they might cite your work in their publication, and you will get a citation for that. And you might get no citations up to tens or hundreds of citations. So the number of citations of each publications is important, as well as the total citations of all your publications. And there's no threshold which is good, which is bad, but we look at this as an index, and we look at the H-index. So what an H-index of an author, for example, my H-index is 10, that means at least 10 of my publications, each has been cited at least 10 times. This can be calculated by the index databases. However, you can calculate it manually. For example, this author has 10 publications. Publication number, we saw the total citations in a decreasing order, and then we put the number of publications in an increasing order. So if you go with me here, 25 is more than 1, 23 is more than 2, 7 is more than 5, 4 is less than 6. So that means that the author H index is 5. That means at least 5 of his publications each has been cited at least five times. So the first, the second, the third, the fourth, the fifth. This is only cited 4 times. It's not cited 5 times or more. That's why the H index is now 5. However, if the citations increase by time, that the H index and the total citations will also increase. So when we assess this, I'll come to conclude my slides and my webinar before I get your questions. So when we look at the bibliometrics, we look at the number of papers and indexed journals. We look at the total citations, the citations per paper, the H index, the authorship positions, the publication type, the impact factor of the journal, and the number of papers in Q1 and Q2 according to the impact factor. And this will reflect about you as an author or researcher, about your productivity, efficiency, total recognitions and influence, relative impact, and the multi or interdisciplinary work that you do with your collaborators. So notes to keep by the end of the webinar: do publish, make sure to have a focused research interest, so don't diverse your research. Publish journal articles more than books or grey literature. Publish original research more than reviews, case reports, and other forms. Seek being a major contributor, first or corresponding. Publish in peer-reviewed journals and in journals with good impact factor. Publish in Q1 more than Q2, more than Q3 or Q4, and always rely on databases like JCR to check the impact factor. Accept being rejected, it's fine, we all went through this. Be present on Scopus and create a Google Scholar and ORCID ID, and boost your total citations and H index. And these are the references for this webinar, and I would like to thank again AHCI International and AHCI MENA for welcoming me, and I now can receive your questions.
Thank you, Mr. Kreidieh, for your rich presentation. Now we'll be answering the participant questions. Please, if you have any question, you can type it using the chat feature provided by Zoom.
Okay, can you please ask me these questions?
Okay.
I think there's no questions.
Yes, I guess so.
So you can. So we have some questions here from Sarah, thanking us a lot for this informative and helpful presentation. Catherine, how will all journals survive if everyone tries to only publish in Q1? You have this is like a valid question. It's not about the journals. The journals, they have to try to attract more authors in order to publish them and increase their citations, and it's about you as the researchers and the institutions you are working at. So I urge you to read the guidelines of the academic institution you are working at. If they ask you to publish part of your promotion package as an academician in their journals. So this is just an advice to seek Q1. This will increase your quality of the research, but if you couldn't, as I said in my previous slides, you can go to Q1, Q2, and Q3. And on yearly basis, the quartiles and the ranking of the journals might increase or decrease, so don't worry about them, they will survive without you things. We have another question from Dalia Al-Hadi. How do we show we are corresponding author? So when you are the corresponding author, if you are the author responsible about opening the website of the journal, going into their online submission and submitting the manuscript and following all the guidelines. And on the manuscript itself, before the draft manuscript that you will be submitting, you list yourself as a corresponding author, and online submission, they will ask who is that corresponding author. And if your publication got accepted, on the publication itself, when it's out, there it will be written that, for example, Dalia Al-Hadi is the corresponding author. Here's her affiliations and with the email. So they will put your email so that if any reader have any questions, they can directly email you at the corresponding author. Carrie had the questions. What is your opinion of post-publication peer review? What do you mean by post-publication? The manuscript should go the peer revision process before it is published. Once it's published, it's now online and available to anyone. So I didn't understand your question. If you can restate it in different words. Daria, also the corresponding author does not have to be the second one in line, right? Yeah, some journals nowadays, they accept the corresponding author to be listed at any authorship position. The corresponding could be the first, second, third, or the last, but in general, most of the publications, the last author is the corresponding author. Catherine, do only certain journals use credit, or should we always try to include this information as a best practice to acknowledge all contributions to a paper? Yeah, so this is a valid question as well. It depends on the journal. Some journals would ask, for example, if you have a manuscript with 5 authors, what did the first author contribute to, the second, the third? So it's better to list the contributions of each author, basically to the writing, to editing, to the experiments, or everything. So it depends on the journals, but most of the journals nowadays are asking about the authorship contributions per each publications. We have maybe last 2 questions from Dalia and Carrie. Dalia, if we are neither a first nor a corresponding author, does the publication? That's of course, it does, especially for junior junior researchers or graduate students. Any authorship position does count. I urge you all to publish. If you are early in your career and you have contribution to this manuscript, definitely go ahead and be listed as an author. And with time, when you build experience in research and you have your own ideas, you can become the first or the corresponding author, depending on your contribution to that work. The last question, where the manuscript is published first and then it is peer reviewed, such as the F100 published journal model. I'm not aware about the MedEd published journal model. I can check this and I can get back to you later on. And yeah, thank you everyone for attending. I'm glad that you found it very helpful. I'm gonna say my email. My email is K for Khalil, A for like an apple, 28@aub.edu.lb. If you have any questions, you can email me, or you can email AHCI Mina, and then they can communicate with me for any of your future questions. Thank you again for attending this webinar, and I urge you all to stay safe with this COVID-19 pandemic, and hopefully see you later on. Bye-bye. Let's stop sharing.